Hi, everybody. This is Addison Shonland, and I've got Team Sarin on the screen here. Nitin Sarin and Vinny Langani. Gentlemen, thank you for being with me.
It's great to be here again,
Yeah.
Addison.
It's Halloween for those of you who celebrate the dead, but for those of us who like to be in the living, it's October the 31st, 2022. Gentlemen, India is coming out of COVID at last, I think, right? And our traffic numbers showed a nice spike. What is your sense of the state of play?
Want to take that? Yeah.
We've had our own share of spikes in traffic because we just had Diwali, which is akin to your Christmas. If I was to draw some sort of a parallel,
Right.
so but you see, we haven't really crossed pre-COVID numbers. So we're there, we're almost there, but you see the high fuel prices, which have translated into higher ticket prices, seem to be taking a toll. So I mean, we are known globally to be a market where we've got some of the highest costs, but we've also got some of the world's cheapest airfares. So
Right.
so you see, when you have the holiday season, Christmas, New Year, Diwali, these long weekends, everybody is traveling, so people have little choice but to sort of pay through the roof or whatever is being charged. But between holidays is when traffic tends to sort of drop. So we're there, but there's still room to sort of finally cross that pre-COVID mark. But we seem to be doing okay.
It's interesting in the US that pre-COVID, the number was around 2.5 million passengers per day. We're around 2 million now. But what's interesting is that the number of flights has shrunk.
In fact, when we were preparing for this call, I was telling Vin that, I was just in the US 4 days ago, and flying anywhere in America right now is so expensive. It's really, really, really expensive. And I was just wondering, why is that? I mean, even though I know we're talking about India today, but what's the reason for that?
The airlines have, they parked a lot of planes. There's a pilot shortage. So it's physics. If you've got to still move the traffic, but you have fewer pilots, you have to fly bigger planes, which is why the 321 and the MAX 9, and of course, Delta put in this order for 100 MAX 10s. Everybody wants a bigger airplane to move that traffic.
Yeah.
You still have to move the traffic, but what's incredibly interesting, and I don't think that many people are paying attention to this, is that the airlines are becoming much more efficient because they're flying a bigger airplane, which costs less ultimately, but they can charge for that. And they are charging like never before. That they literally are going to make up the losses of COVID, very quickly if this continues, because it's interesting. It's almost like there's inelastic demand for air travel in the States. When of course we don't have, it's a big piece of real estate. You're not going to take a bus or a train. It's going to take you too long. I have a friend, for example, this morning, he was saying to me, I'm in Baltimore. He and I are in Baltimore. And he said, I'm going to Miami for the day. If you look on the map, but you can do it only by flying.
Right.
So, he's got a business, he goes there, comes back, and that's it. So I think that to answer your question, Nitin, I think that we're seeing a fundamental, structural change here. And smaller planes are not as popular. For example, Southwest is obviously desperate to get their MAX 7s because their 700 NGs are aging out. And what people don't maybe know about this is that the 700 NG, it starts to crack at a certain age.
Right.
And because they cannot get the MAX 7s, they're taking MAX 8s, and they take them like a couple a week. It's absolutely incredible. So there's all the structural change, and if you see an airline like Southwest, which their typical airplane is 130 seats, is now 160 or whatever it is on the MAX 8, much more efficient. So they complain, but not too much, because in fact there's a benefit to them having the MAX 8 right now. So I think that's where we are in the US. And I've noticed that, in fact, Indigo is taking delivery of 321s left and right.
Huge amounts. In fact, where we are right now, I would call it one of the smaller tier 2 or tier 3 cities, and all the flights virtually that Indigo is operating from here are all 321s, and it's quite incredible.
So it's got to be, to Vinny's point there about the price of fuel. We have this thing that I've learned from you gentlemen about the taxation. If you fly a turboprop, you pay one kind of taxation, and if you fly a turbine, it's a different kind of taxation, but it's the same essentially same technology and the same fuel. Weird, but in that case too, if you're trying to save money, the 321 is the way to go.
Yeah,
or Max 9, or the large airplane is the better economics.
Yeah. And in India, it's also got to do with slots. All our metro airports are slot constrained, capacity constrained. So it just, when Indigo switched the vast majority of their aircraft to the 321, it just made sense, because you'd use the same slot and add X number of extra passengers every flight, about 40, 45 or whatever the number is. So it was a no-brainer, really.
And it's, the other day I was sitting with one of these erudite, engineering friends of mine. And he was explaining to me, we were going through, an aircraft lease agreement, and you have those various levels at which you can, derate an A320 and A321 engine. So he was explaining how it works to me, and how the cost between an A320 and an A321 is actually very little. But you get a lot of extra seats for, just very little extra. So it's quite fantastic how the numbers work, and you really do realize why the 321 is a preferred aircraft now.
And you can see therefore why people like, Alaska, for example, in the States, has moved to the Max 9.
Yes.
What was a heavy, they had a lot of 900s, a lot of 800s, but the Max, it's a step change. And you see why people like Delta has gone for the Max 10. United is saying if they cannot get the Max 10, they're going to have to buy 321s. The world is moving. There's an upsizing across the board. And I think that it's clear why that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
By the way, when you talk about derating, I heard a fascinating story. Rolls-Royce engines on the Airbus 350 and the 330 for that matter, on the 900, Delta is having a little bit of a difficulty flying out of Johannesburg, hot and high as Denver, and they don't have the same capacity to carry freight as they used to have with the 777s with the GE90 out of Johannesburg to Atlanta nonstop. It's their longest nonstop leg, and the whisper in the wind from a pilot is that the engines Rolls-Royce are powered by the hour, and Rolls-Royce has derated the engines on the 350 so that they cannot be hammered. And of course, when you take off out of Johannesburg with a full load, and that runway is like it's a curvature of the earth, they don't want the engines to burn out.
It's aviation's always been an interesting play of technology versus economics. So that's possibly one of the best examples.
Right, and it's fascinating that you have, we live in a world now where you can learn this stuff.
Yeah.
Because so much of it has been murky.
True.
But it's fascinating to learn this stuff. And it's always the little anecdote here and there, that conversation, that aha moment.
Yeah. Similarly, on the 777-300ER, so American flies it to Delhi from JFK. And you see, they launched this flight and they never had approvals to fly over. They never had overflying rights with Russia, even when they could. So, I mean, I'm not sure if they applied too late or they weren't approved, and then the world changed with what happened in Ukraine. So they've always avoided Russian airspace because they didn't have the approvals to begin with. So in the winters, what happens is, and this happens, on some occasions on various days of the week. So when they depart Delhi, they've got to divert to Halifax, and they have a whole set of crew there who take the aircraft on to JFK, because it's just, it's just impossible to fly it. And there's also flight duty limitations there at play. but it's also, again, to make sure you want to carry bags and cargo and passengers and depart Delhi. Though we don't really have, we're not a hot and high airport. But you see, again, it just sort of ties into how technology and economics and engineering, everything comes together, and they make that decision to divert and still sort of decide to operate a flight like that.
Right. It's interesting that, and they divert knowing all the assets are in place.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, I know we've talked about this topic quite a bit already, but I recall the days when Air Canada, I think they used to fly the 767 to Delhi, like in the initial days, and there'd be stories of they'd make it one way, I think, nonstop, but one way they had to do a fuel stop somewhere, and a lot of the times you'd have passengers complaining that their bags were they made it, but the bags never made it. So, explaining to them that, the weight versus fuel versus, the legs that an aircraft has, it's a interesting proposition.
And it's back to, but for social media, passengers wouldn't be able to share this knowledge, each other, what your expectations should be.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So there's a positive coming out of social media. Who knew?
Absolutely.
Yes, indeed.
And next item that I want to talk about is the Tata Airbus connection. This is a very interesting and possibly under-discussed item.
Well, it's pretty much hot off the press. It's really the headlines in all of India at the moment. So it's a military transport plane, the 295. Which is actually manufactured originally in Spain. That's going to be, so India ordered 56 of these aircraft for the Indian Air Force. And under the agreement, the first 16 were going to be delivered, manufactured in Seville in Spain. Whereas the remainder of the 40 are to be manufactured in a new facility in the state of Gujarat. So that was inaugurated with a lot of pomp and show and things like that, which is it's a very good move for the whole manufacturing industry in India. We come from a very close with the Hindustan Aeronautical Limited. I mean, they do an excellent job, but this is really the first time that a very large private operator will be manufacturing in the country. So at least I'm very, very proud of this new venture.
It's a big win for India, but it's also a big win for Airbus, having yet again a FAL outside of Europe, with non-euro costs. What is the 295 going to replace? The Dornier?
It's going to replace the Avro 748.
So
we've had those from the mid-60s. Yes.
That's an old airplane. Rolls-Royce Dart engines. Wow.
Yeah, but interestingly, you see, the Tatas have a similar venture with Boeing as well in India. So they're actually in bed with both.
But of course the Tatas do.
Of course. So, I mean, with Boeing, they aren't really manufacturing aircraft per se, but a lot of aircraft parts are being manufactured. But I think it's sort of, you see, this is India's time, and as we mature as a market, and we can then go out and tell the world that, listen, if you want to sell to India, you make in India. And an analogy that can be drawn is with all these metro lines that have come up, rapidly coming up in India. So you see, when we give a contract to Alstom or Bombardier or these large sort of metro operators, and manufacturers of metro coaches globally. So there is a precondition there in the RFP to say, listen, we'll take the first few from wherever they're coming in the world, but you will set up shop here. And because we're building so many metro lines across the country in so many cities, it just makes sense for them to have a manufacturing facility here. So they all manufacture here. In fact, I'm not sure if it is probably Bombardier, but I may be wrong, who's now actually manufacturing in India and sending these to Australia. So
remember, Bombardier Trains is now Alstom.
Oh, okay. There you go. So I'm not a train geek. So you'll have to
I
forgive
know.
me for that.
I'm trying. I'm dying to correct him, saying that it's called rolling stock. It's called
Yeah.
rolling stock.
It's called rolling stock. So
So-
train
And
geek.
it's called light
But-
rail, not metro. But hey, we like
Yeah.
it still.
Yeah, but I'm just passionate about India overall. So it just goes to show that because we have the demand, and more so, like Nitin said, the expertise, we
Yeah.
have the engineers. So why not build here? So it's amazing.
And just our viewers might enjoy this, but that's exactly the sort of tussle Tesla and the government of India are in currently. So Tesla wants to enter India, and India's saying that you're more than welcome as long as you manufacture in India. So that's exactly where they are at loggerheads at the moment. It's not a dispute per se, but I believe that's from the press, that's where they are at right now.
So I think it's interesting from the public policy point of view. India is taking a very rational approach, but it's the approach that China took.
Yeah.
And China has not endeared itself to companies that had to be forced into doing certain things. And of course, there was always the threat of IP theft. How strange that the ARJ21 looks like a DC9 or 717. How strange that the C19 919 looks so much like a 320 something.
Mhm.
You can imagine that companies that own IP would be extremely nervous because of the China experience. What is India going to do to protect people's IP? Are they going to? How does that work?
For starters, we're a democracy. So you see, that sets us apart from the word go. So, and at the end of the day, it's more to do with the opportunity for these Western companies. We are a market who are said when it said we would grow at about 5% despite the looming recession. Now, where else in the world can you find that kind of growth and that opportunity?
And to answer your question, because of our legal system, it's if a foreign company or a foreign citizen comes and sues an Indian company, it's not a given that the Indian company is going to win. It's our courts are very, very open to handing out justice to the party who deserves it. So IP is a very, very protected part. So anyone who's coming into India would be rest assured that they'd be well advised by lawyers. Of course, a little bit of a sale from
Promotion.
my end, but we have some of the best lawyers in the world to protect your intellectual property. So
Nitin, when my question wasn't to try and stir trouble, it was to exactly elicit that response, which is so important. That
absolutely,
if there is a rule of law, I mean, the amount of the classic example, of course, is biotech, right?
Absolutely, yes.
In India's biotech is products are much cheaper than Western medications, and the Israelis are the same thing. Where once something goes out of patent, the smart people all over that and invent, reverse engineer something, and it's a fraction of the price.
Absolutely. And look, I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, whether it's happening because the manufacturing is taking place in India, or it's very easy for me to go and buy a Tesla and import it, in a container or on a ship, and I could possibly reverse engineer that too. So for someone who wants to play a dishonest game, they're anyways going to play a dishonest game. So I don't think the fact of coming and manufacturing here and bringing trade secrets into the country really makes a difference.
Right. But I think also to Vinny's point, right? I mean, India is just a market of such critical mass.
Absolutely.
And in the end, if you want to be a player, that's a good place to invest. You've got incredible skill sets, you have an incredible consumer size.
Yeah.
And as the country starts to improve its wealth, I mean, that's a place you need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you're not actively doing anything, you increase, the consumerism by just 2% or 3%. We're talking huge numbers.
Right, exactly. But just to come back to the Tata Airbus thing, so the Tata companies now have ties into both of the sides of the duopoly. Does that have any bearing on other things that the Tatas do, like, let's say Air India?
Well, I mean,
Asking for
there
a
is-
friend.
I mean, it's widely conjectured that there's going to be a significant order from the Tata Group, and I won't be surprised if Airbus and Boeing are both vying for a piece of the pie. But what way this is going to go is anyone's guess. But given the supply chain issues, I mean, they've recently gone out and leased 25 narrow body aircraft and 5X Delta 777s to augment ultra long haul capacity. So, I mean, and that's more to do with the fact that, if you were to order an Airbus aircraft today, you'd possibly get it in like 2 years time or whatever, or a year and a half, or not before that, because, the delivery slots are probably not there.
Right.
That's probably one place where Boeing has an advantage with the MAX, because China still continues to not let the MAX fly. From what I read, there's about 136 odd of these aircraft that are earmarked for Chinese airlines, and Boeing has begun sort of remarketing them to other airlines. So you see, and that's where, I mean, to bring Akasa in, all their current aircraft that are coming in, and I think it's the first 18 or whatever, are all aircraft that were supposed to fly for other airlines. These are NTUs, and one would assume they got a great deal, because Boeing would want to grow their presence in a market like India, which is predominantly, at least in the narrow body segment, dominated by Airbus. And Akasa got a great deal when it comes to
everybody was a winner.
Exactly. Yep. So coming back to your question, I'm sure both OEMs are talking to the Tatas, and I mean, and even Embraer for that matter, you see, I mean, I'm sure they're talking to them too. So it remains to be seen what happens. But yes, I would not be surprised. And it may be slightly premature, so it may not happen. But in due course, we may see Airbus aircraft being manufactured here. If not all, I mean, you never know. The possibilities are endless.
Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the world we live in, right? So you brought up Akasa. That's a great segue to just to do a quick run through of what's going on with Indian Airlines. Indigo and the 777. That was like, where did that come from? What an interesting move.
Yep, indeed.
But eventually shut down. Yes. So I believe they weren't granted approval finally for that. So.
No, from what I know, they wanted a 2-year approval, and our rules say you can wet lease for 3 months, and then that can be extended for another 3 months. So they've got approvals for 6 months, and I guess so. This is more to do with the restricted Turkey-India bilateral. So it only permits 14 flights from each side. So I mean, Indigo and Turkish Airlines are code share partners. So Turkish 777s are going to be used by Indigo wet lease to operate and use the India side of the bilateral, and it sort of makes sense to operate a 777 in place of a 321. And for your viewers, India does not permit wet leasing of aircraft for growing capacity. So it's not permitted. However, in this case, again, we're just this is just one thinking aloud. Indigo has a whole bunch of A320 aircraft grounded because of Pratt & Whitney engine issues. So you see, if you have an X number of aircraft grounded, in lieu of those, you can go and wet lease aircraft, and the regulator will permit you to do it, because you've lost out on capacity. So it's a bunch of things that have come together. Again, conjecture.
Yes.
We must add, but and it seems to be happening, albeit for just 6 months or whatever it is.
This is the Sarin Brain Trust showing its power.
Well, I'll in full disclosure, we do a lot of work with Indigo, so we have to be very careful about what we say.
Yes, but this is just we reading the rules and I'm sorry.
Reading the tea leaves.
Yes.
Reading the tea leaves,
Yes, literally. But it's exciting nonetheless. So
It is. It is.
100%. It's fascinating because it's groundbreaking, and that's always fascinating. Another airline that intrigues me is SpiceJet. What is going on there?
Well, SpiceJet, from what we're hearing, that they're still in a bit of financial trouble, but then at the same time they are also wet leasing aircraft at the for again, it's a difficult one. We're hearing a lot of mixed stories, and we know that the team is trying really hard to get things back on track. But let's see. I don't know what Vin has to add for that, but there are lots of mixed stories we're getting about Spice. But I have to give it to them that they've really hung in there for a long time, despite a lot of bad press, despite a lot of adversities from the point of view of lots of court cases being filed against them, certain lessors wanting to repossess aircraft. They really have worked hard to fight fire, as they say. And at least from my perspective, let's see. I hope they can pull through in a successful manner. But it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, and just to sort of add from the numbers perspective, I mean, whatever capacity they put out, they're able to sell it. So you see, over the last couple of months, the regulator had to step in. They had a couple of safety incidents, and the regulator said, well, you can only mount up to 50% of your approved capacity, which didn't really affect them operationally because they were only operating that much capacity because a lot of aircraft had gone out or were grounded or for various reasons. But they're back to operating 100% of capacity. I mean, subject to the aircraft that they have, obviously.
Right.
But they seem to be, people still seem to have enough confidence in SpiceJet to buy a SpiceJet ticket because they're able to fill up those aircraft. So, and that may even suggest that, they're cheaper than the others, but we're a very competitive market. If one airline decides to, have a flash sale, usually the others follow because, we're such a price sensitive market. So overall, I mean, they're hanging in there, which is always a good thing because an airline going down is not good news for anybody.
Yeah.
Last brand I want to just get a quick take on, or hot take, as they say. Jet. What's going on with Jet? Anything happening?
Well, everybody saw the very first A320 Neo aircraft painted in full Jet livery. So there's ample conjecture that they're getting 3 of these from a lessor in Ireland. The first one has been painted and the world has seen it. How this transpires and when they take to the skies is anyone's guess, because they're coming out of insolvency and there's the courts are involved. So it's anyone's guess how quickly, for all you know, it may happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
And because they've completed the vast amount of the process has sort of been completed. And for all you know, it might take a couple of weeks, but one would assume it would happen.
Any day now, really.
One would
Any
hope
day
so.
now.
One
Yes.
would hope so.
Yes.
It's interesting. India's become like the most exciting place in the world for aviation in many ways.
It is, and it's again, now this is on the lighter side, and going back to Akasa, I don't know whether you read a recent news article, but apparently the airlines become a target for a lot of birds. So the news article said that it's another bird attack on an Akasa aircraft. So I don't know about whether it's an exciting place, but it's definitely become a very hostile place where birds are now targeting aircraft. So it's just
long as
I can send you
everybody's
the
safe.
link later.
Gentlemen, lovely to talk with you.
Pleasure.
Pleasure's all ours. Thank you.